Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and to help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and we now have less than 40 days remaining in the 140-day Texas legislative session. Last week, B joined us to talk about the House passing the Senate's version of the Voucher bill, and it seems like immediately after, we got a ton of postings for bad bills and a handful of good bills sprinkled in for this week. So it has been a crazy week, but people of faith have been responding in incredible ways. We talked about session fatigue on our Marching Orders Monday program this week, and we want to keep reminding people that everyone is tired. I know it, I feel you, I understand. But the work continues, and we hope that you'll hang with us for the next 5-ish weeks between now and the end of session. One of the issue areas that was particularly in focus this week was the return of anti-trans legislation. So we're going to welcome to the program for the first time Texas Impact's policy consultant, Reverend Keats Miles Wallace, one of our favorite ELCA Lutherans and a staff member for Texas Impact's LGBT rights issue champion team, to talk with us both about the policy issues in that space, but also about the importance of people of faith engaging on these bills. As always, if you want to get involved, Texas Impact has tools and resources for you, so check out the Action Center at texasimpact.org. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Reverend Keats Miles Wallace. Joining us for this week's conversation is Reverend Keats Miles Wallace, a policy consultant with Texas Impact and the staff member who works with our LGBTQ rights policy issue team. Keats, it is so good to have you with us. I think this is your first time on the pod, right?
This is my first time on the podcast.
Oh, we are going to have so much fun together. I am excited for this. Where we're not having fun is in the Texas Legislature this week. Before we jump in, how are you feeling? It's been a rough few weeks, right?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, holy cow, this has been a lot. And the anti-trans legislation is always really hard to listen to. And also, there's a lot of it that hasn't been heard yet. And so I'm somewhere between exhausted and optimistic.
Exhausted and optimistic. There's 40-ish days left in the legislative session, I think. So, a lot in the rearview mirror, but a lot still to come. B was on last week, and she talked about she was in a mood. I was in a mood. We were recording the day after the voucher bill went down. And it seemed like as soon as that bill got cleared from the calendar, the lid opened up and all kinds of craziness started coming this week. Does it seem that way to you? That the vibes in the building have been bad, especially on LGBTQ issues and especially on the T part of that, the trans issues this week. Am I reading that correctly? What's the room in the Capitol? How bad is it?
Yeah, I think especially in the Senate, the anti-trans bills are moving much more quickly after the passage of SB2. There had been several things that were on their way to the intent calendar or had been on the intent calendar that are now being heard and passed through the Senate. The House is still moving a little more slowly, but we're starting to hear this week on Friday, we've got our first bad bill of the really bad ones that is coming up. So we're starting to run up against the ones that are potentially really dangerous.
I want to get to the policy in a minute, but before we get there, talk about how folks who advocate in this space, talk about how the LGBTQ plus community is feeling with all of this attention being paid to such harmful pieces of legislation, especially this last week.
I think that's where the rubber really hits the road, is not even the legislation itself, but the impact that it has on communities. And I think that's what you'll hear a lot in testimony on many of these bills in any session, is that the impact is the biggest part. And for the LGBTQ community as a whole, that is an incredibly negative impact. It's an impact that makes people feel marginalized and oppressed in a society, and especially with the trans community and especially trans youth. As trans adults, we often are in a position where we can suss out what is actually of concern and what isn't. Especially when you're educated in the legislative process, you can say, oh, hey, actually, those bills are still sitting red and we have 40 days to go. We might be okay. But trans youth don't have that perspective. And so they get very scared very quickly, and I get very concerned about their mental health. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is not talked about during the legislative session is the impact of just hearing these bills, just having them filed on particularly trans youth.
Yeah, I think that's really important for listeners to hear. And usually, when we do these podcasts, there are a lot of times where I save a pastoral word when we have faith leaders on to the end. But I feel like, given what you just said, it's really important to frame all of this conversation. But before we get into the policy conversation, frame the importance of why it's especially important for faith leaders to speak out. You are someone who's worked in this space, who's lived in this space. So I think it might be important before we talk about the policy to offer a pastoral word or maybe some encouragement for faith leaders and people of faith to speak out on these bills from a faith perspective.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. Often these bills are attacked on a faith basis where they'll say, God said from the beginning, from Genesis, this is what creation is. And many of us hold different interpretations of that and less exclusive interpretations. And so for particularly faith leaders that hold those interpretations that are more inclusive, that are more open to the broad variety of God's creation, it's incredibly important, I think, to avoid the spiritual damage that can occur in these arguments for faith leaders to say, no, you are beloved by God. God created you. And there's this argument about trans people frequently that's God didn't make a mistake, said in the way that you shouldn't transition because God didn't make a mistake at your birth. But you could also make the same argument that God didn't make a mistake in making you trans. That was supposed to be part of your journey from the beginning. And I think reinterpreting a lot of the things that we hear is desperately important for that reason. I believe in a God that doesn't stop interacting in your life at your point of birth, that continues to work and change you. And our scriptures testify to that God continues to work in our lives and changes you as you grow and age, and names change and appearances change and all these different things. I don't see why it would be any different for trans people than it is for anyone else.
And one of the things I have found hope in this week is you've heard legislators and advocates talk about the role faith plays in their support for inclusion and their opposition to anti-trans legislation. Some really great speeches both on the floor and in committee. Any reflection you have on that?
Yeah, this week we had a really interesting opportunity to also hear a statement of faith that was good for trans people, but in support of an anti-trans amendment. Out of Representative Shaheen, he had an anti-trans bill, but specifically said in his discussion that God loves every person that has ever walked this earth, that's not something that he would doubt in any way. And we've also had just yesterday, Senator Cook had a lovely discussion of her journey through faith, and sexuality, and the way that through her sexuality and discovering her sexual orientation that she found God again. And it is as important, I think, for legislators that are of that same more progressive persuasion and faith to make those statements, even if it is in an anti-trans bill and testifying for it. I think it's really important to note, if you have the opportunity, that it's not an issue of faith, that it may be purely a secular opportunity as opposed to spiritual pain and attack.
Yeah, and so the policies that are being presented are largely still bad, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But I do think I find some hope in the idea that some of the theological conversation around these bills has improved over the course of the last decade. And I think that's in large part due to faith leaders, people of faith, advocates like you all speaking out in this space through a faith lens. And so we're grateful for that. Anything else before we turn it to the policy sphere?
No, I think it's really, really important not to hide your faith convictions, no matter who you are, whether you're a faith leader, whether you're a legislator, whether you're just a person who is of faith. It's important to say, especially when you're running into trans youth and LGBTQ people, that you affirm their identity and their existence through your faith. That is the most contested point for us, and the most important point to name.
Love that. So we've had your clergy collar on so far. I'm going to turn to your policy consultant hat now. Not that they're different, but so talk to us about the policy. What should people of faith, what should listeners be watching as we go throughout this week and the rest of the legislative session? What has you most concerned?
Sure. So the thing that I'm hearing most out in the world are bills like HB 3817 and HB 2258. These are scary bills. They have either civil or criminal consequences. The gender identity fraud bill and the bounty bill for support of trans youth. Arguably, those are very scary and also not ones that we really need to worry about at this point in time. They haven't been heard. They aren't really moving. I don't know if they will or not. If they do, that is suddenly a very big concern. But so far, those I think we can set aside and just keep an eye on. The ones
I should say as of April 24th at in the morning. So
absolutely, who knows what changes between now and an hour from now. But I think the ones that we really need to worry about right now are any bills that seek to dictate or define identity. We've got HB 229 tomorrow on the 25th of April, which is seeking to define what a man, a woman, a mother, a father, and a boy and a girl are. And we've got this big divide, I think, where conservative legislation tends to look at these definitions as things of biological reality. Obviously, your body determines these things, whereas the progressive side is looking more of an experiential reality. Your experience in the world tells a story about these things and speaks to what fits you best. And so there's this big clash ideologically right now between this biological reality and an experiential reality that I think seems insurmountable, but I'm wondering if maybe next legislative session, if we might be able to cross that divide.
Fingers crossed. So anything else you think folks should be watching over the course of the coming weeks?
Yeah, big one is SB 240. That one is a new bathroom bill. They're labeling them as private spaces bills. There are several of them. SB 240 is the one that's most likely to move through. I believe it has passed the Senate and is moving into the House. If not, it will very shortly. So as we move into the House conversation on SB 240, that's a big deal. That is covering any institution that is governed by a public subsidy. I forget the exact language, but any governmentally controlled institution. And so that includes the Capitol, that includes your Texas state parks, that includes public schools, that includes a lot of places that would make it potentially more difficult for anyone to use the restroom without being caught up in a "do you belong here" question.
Keats, I can't believe that I've spent like now maybe a decade of my life spending this much time and energy thinking about bathrooms and like where people like use the restroom.
For real.
I thought this was over, but I guess it continues. So it sounds like the Senate has started moving legislation, still doing the work there that's required. Keep an eye on Texas Impacts Action Alert for how you can get involved there. But the real focus is on the House. So if we're looking at homework assignments, it's start having conversations, not just with the committee, but also with your House members. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look at the LGBTQ caucus members and talk with them as well. I think there's the opportunity to talk to your legislator or your representative, absolutely, but the opportunity also to talk to representatives that understand what you're talking about is helpful. And as they're seeking to amend some of these bad bills, I think it's helpful to have those conversations with them as well.
All right, Keats, I'm going to tee one up for you. I usually ask for shameless plugs at the end. I usually ask guests who work other places, like how they can get more information, but you have an opportunity for people to learn more and get involved, right?
Absolutely.
What do you hope people will do when they leave this call today? How can they get involved?
I absolutely hope that you join the LGBTQ plus champions team, which is the easiest way to get involved and the most critically informed way. I think we have a meeting every Tuesday night evening at 4, and we talk about bills and we see what is of the most concern, and we send you on your way with homework of who to talk to and when you need to come testify and all those things. So, the LGBTQ plus champions team, 4 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Go to texasimpact.org, click on the Action Center link. You can sign up for that team there. Keats, anything else we missed today? Anything else you want to cover? Any last thoughts for today?
I think just keep some hope. It always looks bleak. The number of anti-trans and LGBTQ bills is always really, really high. There are some good bills that are moving through. There are a lot of bad bills that aren't moving. So, though it seems crushing, try to keep some hope. Some things will get through, but not the worst of it.
Wait, so I should have asked this earlier. You mentioned there's some good bills. Anything you're particularly excited about that still has a chance?
Has a chance is a great question. They're moving slowly.
I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist. We'll keep that.
There are some anti-discrimination bills that might have a shot. And there are some other bills. The one that is really interesting to me is removing the portion of the Texas Penal Code that says that same-sex sexual activity is a crime. From I think it's from the marriage code portion, and so it's a fascinating piece. That we're removing this little bit of anti-homosexual content here. And that's really exciting. It's got bipartisan support, which is insane. I'm really happy about that one.
Love that. All right. One last closeout. I already had you close out once, but clergy collar back on. What's your word of hope for today?
Oh, man. I think just no matter what legislators say, no matter what bills come through or are written or pass, just remember that the legislature doesn't dictate you as a person. They don't get to decide who you are, though they're going to try. You get to decide that. That's between you and God. And just maintain that hope, maintain that sense of self, no matter who tries to tell you differently.
I love that. And I'll add to it. We have a whole bunch of listeners to this, and many of you will be making telephone calls. Many of you will be showing up at the office. But I think my homework assignment for you might be to show up and to let communities who are being impacted know that you are standing with them, that you love them, that you support them. That's an important part of this advocacy work that you can do, that we can do. And so my hope and my prayer is that folks will take this seriously and make sure that we're standing up, speaking out.
Yeah, allies showing up is the biggest and most important part of this right now.
Yep. Reverend Keats Miles Wallace, y'all don't know how many times I had to say Keats' name at the beginning. I don't know why I have such a hard time saying Miles Wallace, but there it is. Keats, thank you so much for all the work that you do, for your witness, for your advocacy, and for the time today. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, Scott.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Keats, and I hope you'll give some thought this week to how you can stand up and speak out on issues related to the LGBT community and specifically the trans community. If this episode was especially interesting to you, I hope you'll consider joining Texas Impact's LGBT Rights Issue Champions team on the Action Center page of our website at texasimpact.org. As mentioned during the conversation, Texas Impact is posting a weekly action alert on the Action Center page on the Texas Impact website every Monday by noon to be your weekly resource for effective advocacy in the Texas Legislature. If you sign up for the Rapid Response Team, you'll get that email directly to you on Monday afternoon and get an invite to a weekly Zoom with me and B. There are going to be a ton of updates coming in rapid fire succession in the coming weeks, so I hope you sign up for all the things. Sign up for one of the issue teams on the Action Center page at texasimpact.org and get involved. If you have questions about anything from today's episode or want to talk about how you can get involved, please reach out at scott@texasimpact.org. While you're on the website, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. And again this week, because I don't think we're going to do a podcast on it in the near future with everything going on in Austin, y'all get your vaccinations. I keep seeing news about the measles outbreak. It is 2025. We can do better. So with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.